Everyone knows someone like this. You've seen them in the parking lot at work, pulling into a spot next to gleaming SUVs and freshly washed sedans in something that looks like it survived a flood, 2 fender benders, and a decade of neglect. The paint is fading in patches. There's a dent on the passenger door that's just been there. The exhaust makes a sound that turns heads. And yet they step out, grab their coffee, and walk into the office like absolutely nothing is wrong. You watch them, and somewhere in your brain, a question forms that you'd never say out loud. Why would someone drive that? A beater is a car that's lived many lives. It's got high miles, low shine, and a trunk that might not open on the first try. It's not a project car someone's restoring on weekends. It's not a clunker someone's embarrassed about. It's simply the car this person drives, has driven, will probably keep driving. And what's fascinating isn't the car itself, it's the person behind the wheel. Because here's the thing, when you look closely, beater drivers aren't a single type, they come in different forms. There's the college student running on ramen and determination. There's the mid-level manager who earns a solid salary and could absolutely afford something newer. There's the entrepreneur who just sold a company. And there's the retired teacher who's owned the same Civic since 2001 and sees no reason to change that. Different people, different circumstances, same beaten up car. That pattern means something, and psychology has a lot to say about what it means. Most people, when they see a beater, land on the same conclusion. They can't afford anything better. It feels like the obvious answer, doesn't it? The car looks worn. The driver must be struggling. Simple. And sometimes that's true. There are genuinely people driving beaters because their financial options are limited. But here's the strange part. That explanation doesn't hold up across the board.
Quick question. What car do you drive, and what country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. You might just inspire a future car psychology episode.
Because if you actually talk to beater drivers, you find something unexpected. A surprising number of them have options. They have savings. They have income. They could walk into a dealership tomorrow and drive something newer off the lot. They just don't. And that's where the psychology gets interesting. Think about what a car is actually supposed to do. On a purely functional level, a car gets you from one place to another. That's it, a 2003 Toyota with 180,000 miles does that. So does a brand new luxury SUV. The outcome, you arrive at your destination, is identical. So why does one cost 10 times more than the other? Because a car was never just about transportation. It was always about something else. It's about identity. It's about signal. What you drive is a message you send to the world about who you are, what you've achieved, what you value, where you belong. But here's the reversal. Some people have quietly decided they don't want to send that message. Or more accurately, they've decided they don't need to. There's a concept in behavioral psychology called status anxiety. It's the constant, low-grade fear that you're not measuring up, that other people are watching, comparing, and judging where you fall in the social hierarchy. And one of the most common ways people manage that anxiety is through visible consumption. Nicer clothes, bigger house, better car. Most people upgrade their cars not because their old ones stopped working, but because they feel the social pressure to keep up. Because a colleague got something new. Because the old car started to feel like a quiet admission of falling behind. Beater drivers, in many cases, have simply stepped off that treadmill. They've arrived at something psychologists sometimes call enoughness. A settled sense that what they have is sufficient, and that sufficiency doesn't need to be upgraded to be valid. That is rarer than it sounds. Most of us, if we're honest, are perpetually chasing the next level. Beater drivers have stopped chasing, and that's not a sign of giving up, it's often a sign of having figured something out. But here's where it gets deeper, because why someone stops chasing matters enormously. For some people, driving a beater is a financial strategy. They've run the numbers. Depreciation, insurance, monthly payments, opportunity cost. They know that a new car is one of the worst financial investments a person can make. The moment it leaves the lot, it loses value. And that money redirected into savings or investments compounds quietly in the background. These people aren't poor. They're playing a longer game. There's a neighbor, maybe you know someone like this, who drives a rusting pickup truck that's easily 15 years old. The thing leaks oil. The air conditioning gave out in 2019. But this same person owns their home outright, has no debt, and retired at 58. The truck wasn't a burden, it was part of the plan. Think about it. Every car payment someone doesn't make is money that goes somewhere else. Beater drivers often know exactly where it goes. But there's another kind of beater driver, and this one is even more psychologically interesting. This is the person who has money, real money, and still drives something falling apart. Not as a strategy, not to save, simply because the car doesn't factor into how they think about themselves. These people have what psychologists call internal validation. Their sense of who they are doesn't come from what others think of them. It doesn't come from visible signals of success. It comes from something private, their work, their relationships, their values, their record of what they've built. For them, upgrading the car would be a performance, and they have no interest in performing. You see this pattern often in people who've truly succeeded, not the ones who are becoming successful, but the ones who've arrived somewhere and quietly settled in. They don't need the car to announce anything, because the audience they care about, themselves, already knows the story. There's one more layer here that almost nobody talks about: habit. Human beings are creatures of routine, and one of the most underappreciated psychological forces in our lives is the comfort of the familiar. We eat at the same restaurants, we take the same routes to work, we fall asleep at the same time. Familiar things require less mental energy. They feel safe. For some beater drivers, it's not a philosophy, it's not a strategy. It's simply that the car works, they know how it works, they know its quirks and its sounds and its little warning signs. And changing it would introduce a kind of disruption that feels unnecessary. The car has become part of their routine, and their routine is something they protect. There's something oddly human about that. About choosing continuity over novelty, about the quiet trust you develop with something old and familiar, even if it doesn't look impressive to anyone else. Here's what all of this is really pointing at. We live in a culture that treats upgrading as progress. New phone, new apartment, new car. The assumption is that newer is better, and that people who don't upgrade are either stuck or struggling. But that assumption quietly confuses consumption with growth, and they are not the same thing. Some of the most psychologically grounded people you'll ever meet don't have the nicest things. They have clarity about what matters to them, what they're working toward, and what they're willing to spend their finite attention and resources on. And a car, to them, doesn't make that list. What if confidence doesn't need a symbol? What if success looks quieter than we think? What if the person pulling up in the dented, faded, high-mileage car has simply stopped needing to prove anything to anyone, including themselves? That's not a lack of ambition. That might be the thing ambition is actually supposed to get you to. So the next time you see a beater in the parking lot, the one with the peeling bumper sticker and the cracked side mirror, maybe don't assume struggle. Maybe consider the alternative. Maybe that person figured something out that most of us are still working toward. Now I want to ask you something.
What car do you drive, and what country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. You might just inspire a future car psychology episode.